I hereby give notice that in the next sitting of the Council, I shall move that the Council notes that South Africa is undoubtedly a world away from the place it was in 1994 when democracy was achieved. Further notes that millions of people who were marginalized and shut out of the government system now have access to basic services and the state machinery. Acknowledge that South Africa under the ANC is a better place than it was in 1994. Among others, our society has been transformed in every sphere with increased education levels, access to water, electricity, sanitation, housing, and the like. The number of graduates have doubled, millions of houses have been built, more than 15 million have benefited from government's comprehensive anti-poverty initiatives. The social grant system has expanded from 2.7 million people to 16 million currently and has contributed to a significant reduction in the proportion of households living in poverty, while the economy has since expanded by 83%. I take this opportunity to honor all those brave men and women who have fought tirelessly for the freedom and democracy that we enjoy today, and who have paid their lives, and takes this opportunity to commend the ANC-led government, the achievements and the commitment of South Africa forward to a better future. Thank you, Chairperson.
Honorable West.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. On behalf of the Democratic Alliance, I hereby wish to give notice that at the next sitting of the Council, it notes that, firstly, some 21,000 jobs were lost in the Free State Province between July and September this year, according to the latest figures released by Stats SA. Secondly, the decline in available jobs pushed the provincial unemployment rate to 34% from 33.1% in the previous quarter. Thirdly, in the Free State Province, most of the job cuts were recorded in the social services, manufacturing and utility industries. Lastly, this leaves only 740,000 people with jobs in the Free State Province compared to 761,000 between April and June this year. Drastic measures must be taken to revive the mining and particularly the agriculture, which is the backbone of the Free State economy. I so move.
Honourable Jacobs.
Thanks, Chair. I hereby give notice that in the next sitting of the Council, I shall move that the Council knows that the rollout of the My City bus service by the City of Cape Town to the poor and disadvantaged areas of Mitchell's Plain and Khayelitsha will no longer be implemented by December 2013, as previously promised by the Cape Town Mayor Patricia de Lille. Notes that despite the Mayor de Lille's promise at the time that heads will roll if the service were not implemented by December 2013. She has now made a complete U-turn and all of a sudden now claims that the delay in the rollout is because of reasons that are justifiable and acceptable, as if she did not know such reasons at the time when she made the promise. Knows that the reasons are now being put forward by the Mayor de Lille, such as bus stops that still do not need to be constructed, failure to train taxi drivers to operate the service, failure to finalize agreements with role players on how they would operate the service, and the availability of buses are questionable and are certainly not justified and acceptable, as she now claims and should have been addressed and resolved long ago and before she made the promise. Calls on Mayor de Lille and the DA to stop their political fooling around and to take communities of these poor areas into their confidence and inform them that the City of Cape Town and DA have neglected and failed them. I so move.
Honourable Sinclair.
Honourable Chairperson, I give notice on behalf of the Congress of the People that the Council in the next sitting of the House debates, firstly, the possibility of sovereign rating downgrade from Moody's Investor Services that has South Africa on AA3 rating, one notch above the BBB+ rating awarded by Standard & Poor's and Finch. Secondly, notes the austerity measures announced by the Minister of Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan, putting a brake on wasteful expenditure and overspending by government officials. Thirdly, further notes that the Auditor General has been over the past 2 years warning government on the lack of control of spending, but that was to no avail. And lastly, Chairperson, calls on the Minister of Finance to spell out measures he will take to control overspending and wasteful expenditure, and how we will ensure that he rescues the budget deficit and meet the target he has set in February of this year of 4.6% to avoid a possible Greece crisis. I so move.
Honorable members, does any member wish to move a motion without notice? I may not take all the hands. Just bear that in mind. I'll go as far as I can. Honorable Abrahams.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. On behalf of the Democratic Alliance, I hereby would like this Council to send condolences to the family of Sandy Mahala, an 18-year-old young girl who was brutally murdered in Eldorado Park and burned to death on the 2nd of November 2013. She was a grade 10 pupil. Her parents sent her to the shops on Friday on the 1st of November, and she never returned. A decomposed body was discovered in an open field on Sunday the 3rd by members of the community. May her God grant her family comfort during this time of bereavement, and may her soul rest in peace and rise in glory.
Any objection to the motion? Agreed to in terms of Section 65. Honorable Mnguni.
Thank you, Chair. I hereby move without notice that the Council notes with shock and concern that allegations of the involvement of Security Company and the AWP, an militant far-right wing movement in farm attacks and the killing of white farmers. Also notes that the allegations that the motive behind such attacks and killings is twofolded, namely, on the one hand, to instill fear amongst farmers and thereby forcing the farmers to make use of the security services of such Security Company, and other hand, to incite racial and other security services of such Security Company, and other hand, incite racial hatred and tension, and to keep alive the notion and illusion of the so-called Swart-Gevaar, and that black people are being responsible for such attacks and killings. Condemn such illegal and corrupt activities, and especially the inciting of racial hatred and tension that harms the dream of Rainbow Nation in the strongest possible terms, and takes this opportunity to call on Minister of State Security and Police to urgently launch a comprehensive investigation into the allegations and practices, and to ensure that the perpetrators are arrested and meet with full might of the law. I so move.
Any objection to the motion? Agreed to in terms of Section 65 of the Constitution. Honorable Manzini.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. On behalf of the Democratic Alliance, I hereby move a motion without notice that the Council notes that a 43-year-old Midrand-based business entrepreneur won $600,000 worth of high-tech equipment for her business at the prestigious Technology for Women in Business Awards held in Mahikeng on Thursday last week. Further notes that Dorothy Vutsi, the owner of Batu Ubuntu Group, emerged the overall winner at the awards in recognition of a thriving business that now employs about 650 people. Also notes that the company provides services like high-access, ladderless window cleaning, garden, landscaping, hospitality, commercial and kitchen cleaning. Further notes that awards held by the Department of Trade and Industry seeks to promote and encourage the embracing of technology in upcoming business enterprises. Also notes that the Small Enterprise Development Agency, SEDA, will also help Butsi implementing more technology-driven initiatives that should take her business to new heights. I so move.
Any objection to the motion? Agreed to in terms of Section 65 of the Constitution. Honorable Ranto.
Thank you, Chairperson. On behalf of the African National Congress, I hereby move without notice that the Council notes with concern allegations of the abuse of ambulances of the Eastern Cape Department of Health, as well as misconduct by ambulance officials. Notes that 2 ambulances were allegedly recently seen over a weekend at a popular braai spot on the beachfront at East London in the Eastern Cape, parked under a tree to a braai with an open fire and the front doors open. Also notes allegation of ambulance staff who worked with a syndicate operating at petrol stations and overcharging for petrol and claiming exorbitant amounts for petrol while the ambulances had only traveled short distances. Condemns in the strongest possible terms such misconduct and illegal practices that not only impact negatively on ambulance services and response times, but also endanger the lives of people, and takes this opportunity to call on the Eastern Cape MEC for Health to urgently investigate this state of affairs and to implement urgent measures to detect such practices and misconduct and to prevent recurring thereof, and also to ensure that the perpetrators are brought to book and that appropriate disciplinary steps be taken against officials. I so move, Chairperson.
Any objection to the motion? No objection agreed to in terms of Section 65 of the Constitution. Honorable Matila.
Thank you, Chair. I hereby move without notice that the Council notes with shock and concern that during a series of raids by the prisons authorities at the Durban Westville prison in KwaZulu-Natal, nearly 1,000 cell phones, SIM cards, drugs, porn movies, handmade weapons, household appliances, ropes, and the like were discovered in the prison in the possession of prisoners. Notes that these items that include 1,000 drug straws and other drugs have been smuggled in by corrupt wardens as well as the public during prison visits, and further notes that serious anarchy and alleged existence in the overcrowded prison, where members of the public run a drug syndicate with prisoners. Calls on the Minister of Correctional Services to urgently launch a comprehensive investigation into this appalling breach of security and the corrupt activities, as well as the overcrowding of this facility. Notes that 12 wardens has since been suspended and 835 prisoners were recently moved to less crowded prisons. Calls on this council to look at the state of the affairs and the prison department, to look at the state of the affairs in all prisons, and call on the minister to bring everybody to book. I so move, Chair.
Any objection to the motion? Agreed to in terms of Section 65 of the Constitution. Honorable Sinclair.
Honourable Chairperson, I hereby, on behalf of the Congress of the People, move without notice that the Council notes, first, a multi-million rand food security program, a government initiative launched recently in one of the Northern Cape's drought-stricken areas. Secondly, the initiative aims to promote self-sufficiency and job creation by growing butternut, spinach, potatoes and onions to sell to Pick n Pay in Kuruman and Kimberley, and will provide much-needed income to its 159 beneficiaries. And lastly, Honourable Chairperson, this initiative is launched at the time the Masibambisani Rural Development Initiative, a non-governmental organization run by President Zuma Cousin, is surrounded by controversy for the lack of spending the funds, much needed by emerging farmers to improve food security in rural areas, and yet stands to benefit nearly 1 billion rand from government funding. I so move.
Any objection to the motion? In the light of objection, the motion may not be proceeded with. The motion without notice will now become a notice of a motion. Honorable Svande.
Thank you, Chairperson. I hereby move without notice that the Council notes the reports of hired researchers by the Eastern Cape Human Settlement Department to stop the selling of RDP houses in the province. Further note that the hired researchers will try to root out the persistent problem of people who sell or rent out their RDP houses. only to demand houses from government again. The department says that the houses are sold and rented mainly to foreign nationals. And in the most instances, the houses are used as spaza shops. Applaud the initiative by the provincial department which seeks to fight corruption and also assist in speeding up the delivery of houses to the needy people. I so move.
Any objection to the motion? In terms of the objection, the motion may not be proceeded with. The motion without notice will become a notice of a motion. Honorable Mukhobe.
Honorable Chair, I hereby move without notice that the Council knows the violent protests that have recently erupted in Bekkersdal in the west of Johannesburg in Gauteng, where residents were protesting against alleged corruption in the local municipality and demanded better service delivery. Note that the protest action that also involved the young children has not only caused damage to municipal buildings and other infrastructure in excess of 11 million, but it has also caused loss of lives and disrupted schools while matric learners were to prepare for their final examinations that have to start last Monday. Acknowledges the right of people to protest, but condemns these violent protests involving children, damaging municipal property and other infrastructure, disrupting schools and endangering lives in the strongest possible terms, and calls on the mayor and his council to urgently engage with the community to address and resolve their concerns. Also take this opportunity to call on the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs to urgently finalize the investigation that was launched into the matter and to implement urgent measures to address and resolve the matter satisfactorily. I so move.
Any objection to the motion? Agreed to in terms of Section 65 of the Constitution. The last person on the motion will be Honorable Nyambi.
Thank you, Chair. I hereby move without notice that the Council notes that the Nelspruit Regional Court in Mpumalanga has sentenced a 42-year-old married father with 3 children to 3 consecutive life terms for having raped his teenage niece over a period of 3 years. Note that this 14-year-old girl, who has no other family to care for her, looked up to her uncle as a father who will care for her and protect her and whose home she can feel safe and live freely. Instead, he failed her and hurt her in the most gruesome manner possible, and as the court described it, I quote, "The rape of a child is worse than killing her," close quote. Further notes that as a result of this barbaric deed, the girl not only still suffers physical pain from the injuries her uncle inflicted on her, but she has also been traumatized and injured to such an extent that she cannot continue with her education and her life is therefore ruined. Welcomes the sentence and take this opportunity to call on the Minister of Women, Children and Persons with Disability and the Minister of Social Development to come to evaluate and monitor the situation and to rescue of this girl if necessary. I so move.
Any objection to the motion? Agreed to in terms of Section 65 of the Constitution. Order, honorable members. The Secretary will read the first order of the day.
Consideration of the Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Amendment Bill, B42D 2013-2012, and of the report of Select Committee on Trade and International Relations thereon.
I now call upon the Honorable Minister, Minister Davis.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. The Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Bill, which is before the Council today, along with the amendments which we made to the Codes of Good Practice, which were gazetted last month, are the product of extensive discussions and considerable work undertaken within the framework of the BEE Advisory Council. The BEE Advisory Council is a statutory body which comes into existence in terms of the 2003 BEE Act, and it was appointed for the first time at the beginning of this administration by President Zuma. Within the Council, we analysed and evaluated the state of BEE in this country as we saw it at the time at the beginning of this administration, and we looked at some of the challenges that were required in order to bring BEE to become a tool aligned with and supportive of other government economic policies. What we found from the research which we had commissioned was that, in fact, within the private sector in particular, BEE was in fact a very modest event. Very little BEE was going on, and the overall level of BEE, according to the scorecard for the private sector in 2007, was level 7, which is just above the minimum, which is non-compliant level 8. Of the BEE that was going on, much of it was what we can describe as passive shareholding deals, where individuals were involved in some transaction which gave them some shares in a particular enterprise, but often very little by way of real involvement in the enterprise concerned. Although the codes of good practice provided for broad-based empowerment in areas like enterprise development, supplier development, skills development, all of the things where the BEE policies really count, we found, in fact, that there was very little performance except from multinational companies which were seeking exemption from share transactions. As a result, we found that empowerees, or people that were supposed to benefit from empowerment, often did not occupy positions of real leadership or real economic involvement in the enterprises that they were supposed to be participating in, and there was far too little by way of generating real entrepreneurial development and enterprise development among black enterprises in general. Linked to all of that was a phenomenon which we came to describe as complex fronting. Fronting is in fact already an offence covered by the common law definition of fraud. Where you present a company as something which it is not, where you present a company as though it has a level of empowerment which it doesn't in fact have, you are normally doing this to secure some kind of benefit in terms of a tender or a contract, or access to some kind of regulatory benefit from government, or even to present yourself to consumers and the public as something which you are not. It is in fact, therefore, a form of fraud. And there have been a few instances or cases of fraud arising from fronting practices which have passed through our courts. But the problem is that the common law definition of fraud and the procedures required have been too difficult and too cumbersome to deal with this practice. We also found that fronting was taking on new and different guises. The general idea that many people have of fronting is that a company takes somebody who is in a minor position in the company, let us say the cleaner or the gardener, calls them the chief executive officer. They don't in fact carry out the functions of the chief executive officer, nor do they have the powers, and the company then presents itself as though it is a black-led or black-empowered company. That is a phenomenon which is becoming increasingly rare. Much more often we find complex transactions which are presented to people where people perhaps imagine that they're going to play a role in leadership in the company, sit on the board, be part of the management team, and they find when they look at the small print, something else is actually what's on the cards. And we found, therefore, that we need a more sophisticated set of instruments to deal with that. Now, the bill which is before the House today will, in fact, provide a statutory definition of fronting. It will define fronting as misrepresenting or attempting to misrepresent the BEE status of an enterprise, providing false information or misrepresenting information to verification agencies or verification agency personnel in order to secure a BEE status for which that company is not entitled. Providing false information or misrepresenting information relevant to assessing the BE status of an enterprise. It can also include the failure by BE verification personnel or any agency to report offences which are detected. And what we have provided for is the statutory definition and then an instrument to deal with offences of this sort in the form of a commissioner who will be an official that operates without fear or favour, but within the ambit of the Department of Trade and Industry as part of our programme and policy of bringing regulatory agencies into the department. And the Commission and the Commissioner will be required to oversee and supervise adherence to the BE Act, to receive and investigate complaints, to find solutions where these are possible in terms of potential fronting practices. But in the end of the day, where no solution of that sort can be found, to work with the law enforcement and the judicial arms of government to ensure that there is prosecution for the offence, the statutory offence of fronting. And the bill provides that for fronting practices, there is a maximum penalty of up to 10 years imprisonment, followed by a period of exclusion of doing business with government. And we think that this provision within this bill will complement also some of the provisions that are in the new codes of good practice, where we are essentially saying that the priorities to ensure that there is real empowerment, real transfers of skills, capacities and opportunities to black people to become involved in the productive sector of the economy, that we need to achieve some of this through, among other things, changing the scorecard so that we require performance across the board in the scorecard by setting sub-minimum requirements in areas like supplier development, skills development and ownership, and saying that if enterprises don't achieve those sub-minima, which is basically 40% of the target, then they will be reduced by one place in the overall scorecard. So we are introducing an incentive, or if you like, a disincentive not to perform broadly across the scorecard. Other parts of the bill, which is before the Council today, will establish a regulatory framework for the verification industry. We've seen, as the codes of good practice were introduced, the emergence of a number of verification agencies which offer a service to go to companies and to indicate to those companies what is their overall level of BEE recognition. We have not had an adequate regulatory framework, and the Independent Regulatory Board of Auditors will function as the verification agency regulator. And we believe that this is a strong, independent body conducting activities which is similar or akin to the kind of work which is undertaken by verification agencies, and that this arrangement will provide a degree of regulation so that when verification agencies do in fact make a determination, we can be confident in the integrity of that. Of course, the other point I made when I read out the list of offences under fronting is that if verification agencies do, as we have sometimes heard they do, give a higher score for a higher fee, that will also be dealt with as a form of fronting. In addition to that, the bill before the Council places an obligation. It's no longer a best endeavour. It is now an obligation on all organs of state, public entities, and to implement BEE. There will be reporting and monitoring obligations, reporting obligations by entities, and the Commission will receive these reports and monitor the impact of BEE. The generic scorecard principles will be elevated into the primary legislation. And this will basically enhance the codes of good practice. It's further provided that all sector charters which have come into existence, some of them not in terms of the BEE Act, but in legislation which predated the BEE Act, they will now be required to align themselves to the codes of good practice. We believe that bred together with the codes which we have, as I said, published last month, we believe that this bill will enable us to strengthen the impact of BEE in this country. BEE remains, in our view, a political imperative, a matter of social equity, but also an economic imperative. If we continue to run our economy, drawing the skills, the talent, and the leadership only from a small section of our population, we will be depriving ourselves of the talent pool and the skills and the opportunities that are really necessary for us to achieve levels of economic growth and inclusive economic growth at that. We are confident that this piece of legislation is a step forward. It was approved in the National Assembly virtually unanimously, and I trust that it will pass through this Council with the support of the overwhelming majority. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. I now call upon Honorable Kamete.
Thanks, Chairperson. I want to thank the Minister for what he has delivered just now and for introducing this bill. Thank you, Minister, and your department. You are doing everything right these days. Your department is leading and taking this country forward to where we want it to be. In 1994, we inherited a racial economy whose capacity to grow was severely constrained by the exclusion of the majority. We knew that the transformation was not going to happen by osmosis. Deracialization had to happen through an effective implementation of transformative policies. We pride ourselves on having sound economic transformation policies. Our approach to economic transformation is informed by the historical principles espoused in the Freedom Charter, Ready to Govern, and the Reconstruction and Development Program. It is further elaborated in ANC conference resolutions every 5 years. The deracialization of the South African economy and the effective participation of black people in the economy can no longer be delayed. Black economic empowerment is an economic imperative. The BE has, unfortunately, according to many in the business, corporate, and indeed among intended beneficiaries, not yielded the intended results. Some have even argued that it has only benefited a certain few. Thus, then, the purpose of the amendment of the bill is to align the Act with other legislation impacting on BBBE with the revised good codes of practice which are more coherent and clearer. The introduction of the concept of BBBE verification professionals and clarifying and extending the minister's power to make regulations. To give effect to government policy aimed at de-racializing the economy to enable meaningful participation of black people, women, youth, workers, and people with disabilities, and rural communities, thus defeating poverty and creating employment. These amendments to broad-based black economic empowerment legislation are needed to ensure that
South Africa's economy is more inclusive and that transformation in South Africa is sustainable. It is not only socially unjust, but economically unsustainable to think we can run an effective economy that draws its leadership and entrepreneurial capacity only from a minority of the population. Simple fronting is easily recognizable. However, complex fronting requires rigorous measures and robust instruments. The establishment of a full-time commissioner and the armor of punitive measures is expected to arrest this practice. Fronting is a sanitized term of fraud, and it is an affront to the dignity of the poor and emerging entrepreneurs. The proposed amendments to the BBBE Act would define the practice of fronting, including complex fronting, and introduce a commissioner with the power to impose penalties. The proposed amendments to the BBBE Act would define the practice of fronting, including this complex fronting. Complex fronting involves companies drawing up complicated contracts which deprive black managers of the appropriate authority for their positions. Offences have been introduced into the amendment bill. These offences cover fronting practices and misrepresentation related to the BBBE status of an enterprise. Depending on the severity of the offence, these are penalized to a maximum imprisonment of 10 years or a fine not exceeding 1% of the enterprise annual turnover, or both. A convicted person may also not transact with the state for a maximum of 10 years. The codes by which compliance was assessed also needed to be revised to encourage symbiosis between large and small companies. All heads of departments, CEOs of state-owned entities will have a legal obligation to report on the performance of their institutions, re-implementation of the BBBE. In line with the ANC's government policy, the BBBE seeks to go beyond mere shareholding and dividends, which is not creating sustainable transformation. The pathology of tenderpreneurship has been diagnosed and the harshest punitive protocols established. BBBE will eliminate tick box scorecards mentality, which earlier drove compliance instead of performance, and the auxiliary imperatives of education and access to the economy were limited with an overemphasis on the ownership element. The amendments recognize the need for a review of procurement methodology and the need to introduce specific and targeted measures of industrialization. Credit will be given to companies facilitating these measures. The earlier complicated codes have been simplified into three main groups, namely direct empowerment, which integrates ownership and management control; human resources empowerment, which integrates employment equity and skills development; and thirdly, indirect empowerment, which integrates preferential procurement with enterprise development and social and economic development. The categories of employment equity and management control would be merged into a single category, as would preferential procurement and enterprise development. The amendment also sought to introduce sub-minimum requirements for the priority elements of ownership, skills development, and the enterprise and supply development categories. If you don't score sub-minimum and you are a large business, will reduce your overall score by 2 places. At present, small companies had to pay a verification agency for a certificate to prove as proof of their BE rating. But this placed an inordinate and unnecessary burden on these enterprises. As such, these 100% black-owned small enterprises would automatically be regarded as level 1. Essentially, what the amendment seeks to achieve is to turn BE from supporting passive shareholding to a BBBE that supports a much more active and productive empowerment of black people across the economy. The fear that the BBBEE has destroyed opportunities for white people, which is being fueled by certain opposition parties. Firstly, BBBEE has brought value to unlisted companies, largely white shareholders. Prior to BBBEE, no such opportunities existed to value these entities. In short, evaluating one's private company by applying BBBEE codes gives such owners the opportunity to sell off a percentage, perhaps as high as 70% or as low as 25%. Yet it would be unfair if the legislation prescribed to each and every business to comply with BBBEE. However, this piece of legislation applies only to those businesses that wish to do business with the state or SOEs. Again, within the BBBEE itself, there are opportunities for whites to conduct business. In conclusion, the amendments to the BBBEE will have a positive impact on employment, income distribution, economic growth, and transformation within the developmental state. It is of great significance that today we have the opportunity of adopting this BBBEE amendment bill, as we remember how the new Land Act passed today in this House will redress the basic economic injustices of the 1913 Land Act. Today, black people can truly begin to reclaim their economic heritage that 100 years ago turned them into pariahs in their own land. Chairperson, I want to thank the officials of the department, Minister. They are always accessible, always available, even on the phone, and are open to suggestions and constructive criticism. We then propose, and with a very wide smile, urge this House to adopt this bill. I thank you.
Honorable B.L. Abrahams.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. Good afternoon, Minister. Good afternoon, members. Good afternoon, members in the gallery. And a special welcome to our Chief Whip of the DA. Thank you. Honourable Chairperson, the DA supports measures to broaden participation in the economy as one of our pillars of empowerment, along with other pillars, being the need to grow the economy, create jobs, and provide education. The DA supported this bill in the National Assembly insofar as it is aimed at strengthening measures against fronting and improving the administrative support from the government for the BBBEE. The DA, but we did so on the assumption that the codes of good practice, which would be tabled by the Minister, would ensure that the bill will be implemented in a way that is truly broad-based and non-racial. The subsequent publication of the codes has shown that the Minister has not acted in good faith. Honourable Chairperson, indeed, the codes are highly problematic and we oppose them unequivocally. For the following reasons: there appears to have been complete disregard for public submission from business and civil society. The so-called regulatory impact assessment is a sham. Qualifying small enterprises are no longer able to choose from 4 out of 7 elements on the scorecard. And now we have to comply with the 5 mandatory elements, including ownership. Qualifying small enterprises no longer have a simplified scorecard, but will be subjected to the same burdensome detail as large enterprises. The original codes made provision for the build-in review periods. This reassured business and invested that the efficacy of the codes will continue to be evaluated and could be reconsidered if necessary. This clause has been scrapped. The change in the definition of new entrants, as well as reduction of the target in this regard, serves to further narrow, not broaden. The contribution of ownership deals to truly broaden the base of economic participation. Honourable Chairperson, the use of racial subcategories in this target for skills development and employment equity poses a particular challenge because it requires a greater deal of racial categorization by further breaking down the definition of black into African, coloured, and Indian. Honourable Chairperson, why does this sound familiar? This is a perfect example of how the ANC misuses basic legislation, which gives extensive powers to the minister to push through regulations without appropriate consultation or parliamentary involvement. Honourable Chairperson, the DA looks forward to a time when everyone in South Africa will participate fully in a non-racial economy and society. We know that South Africa will be a giant, perhaps still in our time, Louis, at this present juncture, where 20 years later we still face severe economic inequality. It is the responsibility of all South Africans, a responsibility from which we simply cannot shy away, to indeed promote strategic interventions to counter the devastating effects of apartheid. But this cannot be done in the way envisaged by the codes, and which I have outlined above. The DA, therefore, can no longer support the BBBEE. Thank you, Siyabonga.
Order. Sorry, Mr. Watson, I didn't see you on the gallery. You, on behalf of the House, you are welcome to watch the proceedings. Mr. Watson is a former member of this House. Thank you. Honorable Dikale.
Honorable Chairperson, Deputy Chairperson, Honorable Minister, Members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen. When we took over the reins of power in 1994, we inherited a severely fractured economy with highly skewed economic opportunities and the distribution assets of such as land and capital. This was largely because for many years the masses of our people were systematically relegated to the harshest living conditions of deprivation and discrimination, deeply characterized by lack of education, abject poverty, unemployment, and migrant labor located in Bantustans. In the document Ready to Govern, an ANC policy guidelines for a democratic South Africa, as the ANC, we recognize the fact that to overcome the legacy of inequality and injustice created by colonialism and apartheid in a swift, progressive, and principled way, we needed to develop a sustainable economy and state infrastructure that will progressively improve the quality of life of all South Africans. In this regard, we committed ourselves to wage a concerted effort to transform South Africa's economy, guided by the following pillars: creating decent employment for all South Africans, eliminating poverty and dealing decisively with the extreme inequalities in our society, democratizing ownership and control of the economy by empowering the historical oppressed and Africans and the working class in particular to play a leading role in decision-making. Restructuring the economy so that it meets the basic needs of all South Africans and the people of the region, especially the poor. Ensuring equitable and mutually beneficial regional development in Southern Africa, thereby fostering the progressive integration of the region. Limiting the negative environmental impact on our economic transformation program. We said this because we recognize that the path of economic transformation necessitates an energized, coherent, and effective approach that will ensure the protection and empowerment of the masses of our people who were previously discriminated, marginalized, abused, and systematically rendered non-active participants of the economy of South Africa. Chairperson, these people are making noise. They're not listening to me. Indeed, the lived experience of our people clearly showed that discrimination and marginalization that they suffered during the long years of apartheid was at its most severe when race coincided with discrimination of the basis of gender or disability. It is for this reason that, as the ANC, we recognize the fact that no economy can grow by excluding any part of its people. We then embarked on a path to broaden the economic base of the country, and through this, at stimulating further economic growth and creating employment. Indeed, over the past 19 years of democracy, significant progress has been made in meeting the basic needs of our people, including through the growth of social wage and the provision of social infrastructure. However, the redistribution of economic assets and the growth of job-creating industries have not met the expectation we have in 1994. Therefore, as the ANC, we have recognized that an integral part of the second phase of our transition from apartheid to a national democratic society, we need to accelerate growth and intensify our program of economic transformation. In the 52nd National Conference of the African National Congress, which was held in Polokwane in 2007, we committed ourselves to ensuring that our next 5 years, the ANC will take decisive and resolute action to overcome the triple challenges of poverty, inequality, and unemployment, which are at the heart of South Africa's socio-economic challenges. We intend to transform the structure of the economy through industrialization, broad-based black economic empowerment, addressing the basic needs of our people, including women and youth, strengthening and expanding the role of the state and the role of state-owned enterprise. Honorable Chairperson, the BBBE Amendment Bill builds and strengthens the current national efforts and legislation to transform South Africa's economy and redress the racial marginalization of our people. The new measures seek to establish BBBE Commission to play an oversight and advocacy role. The BBBE Commission will oversee, supervise, and promote adherence with the BBBE Act and cause in the interest of the public. It will also strengthen and foster collaboration between the public and private sector in order to promote and safeguard the objectives of BBBE. The BBBE Commission will receive the investigate complaints relating to BBBE and develop programs to promote advocacy, access to opportunities, and educational programs and initiatives of BBBE. It will maintain a registry of major BBBE transactions, receive and analyze reports as prescribed concerning BBBE compliance from organs of state, public entities, and private sector enterprises. It will also promote good governance and accountability by creating an effective and efficient environment for the promotion and implementation of BBBE. This bill also seeks to create a legislative alignment and consistency to mitigate conflicting provisions and application across. It seeks to clarify the Act status as the primary BBBE legislation by providing that if there is a credit conflict between any law which was in effect before the BBBE amendment, the BBBE Act prevails insofar as provisions that were enacted before this amendment. The effect of this provision is that if there is another statute that regulates an aspect of BBBE that may be enacted in the future, then that will take precedence. That laws will therefore prevent inconsistency being introduced by legislation application to specific sectors that adopts conflict approach to BBBE. That laws has no impact on legislation regulating other issues. There will be a 1-year delay with regards to the trumphing provision. The amendment bill introduces offenses pertaining to misrepresenting or attempting to misrepresent the BBBE status of an enterprise and providing false information or misrepresenting information to the verification personnel in order to secure a particular BBBE status. It also seeks to introduce offenses relating to providing false information or misrepresenting information relevant to assessing the BBBE status of an enterprise to any organ of state or public entity. And for failure by a BBBE verification, professional or any procurement officer or other official of an organ of state or public entity to report offenses to an appropriate law enforcement agency. It clearly expressed that the minimum penalty that can be imposed on an enterprise for an offense involving a deliberate misrepresentation of its BBBE status is 10% of its turnover, and further for a minimum term of 10 years imprisonment if it's a natural person. The core obligation of organ of state public entities, sector councils, and listed public companies to provide BBBE information to the BBBE Commission are specified in order to ensure integrated report on the impact of BBBE. The bill clearly states that the Independent Regulatory Board of Auditors will function as the verification agency regulator as opposed to establishing a new regulatory body. IRBA will have a primary focus as a verification regulator, mandated with the responsibility of protecting the interests of the public and strictly regulating individual registered BEE verification professionals. The Audit Professionals Act 26 of 2005 is in the process of being amended in order to empower IRBA to regulate the BEE verification professionals. In order to give expression to the broad-based approach of the scorecard, the 5 elements of scorecard are encapsulated in the Amendment Act. The status of the sector codes is further clarified by providing that an enterprise in sector in respect of which the Minister has issued a sector code may only be measured for BEE compliance in accordance with that sector code. Honorable Chairperson, I would like to invite the House to adopt this legislation because it is a clear demonstration of a collective national effort and commitment to move with utmost speed to transform the economy of South Africa. I thank you.
Honorable Kunda.
Honorable Chair, Honorable Minister, and all protocol observed. Indeed, let me welcome this BEE amendment bill, which is long overdue. Chair, indeed it is time for the poor and privileged disadvantaged people who have been dispossessed, marginalized, and oppressed to reap the fruits of our new democracy. We need BEE that will assist our people to gain access to real financial assistance, management skills, and mentorship in order to fight this evil called poverty. The government financial institutions like IDC and NEF and many others must act in such a way that the ordinary man in South Africa who is business-minded must be able to approach these institutions even if he or she is blacklisted. Honorable Chair, this amendment bill is precisely addressing this very problem. But Chair, we need to change some issues within the bill, but that we are facing where our people cannot be assisted because of their past. And even if they are assisted, the percentage is too high for them to pay back even higher than the bank in order for them to assist to overcome this evil called poverty. Honorable Chair, this bill must not become a tool without any teeth. Where our people are in possession of a mining permit, like in the Northern Cape, they can't mine even if they got a mining permit for a certain place because they don't have the capital. And if some people use their permits, they are not benefiting. They've been paid 5,000 rand a month for the mining permit, where other people are making millions out of our people. That is wrong. We need to rectify that, Chair. Every effort should be made to ensure that legislated and regulated government empowerment efforts are aimed to those still trapped in poverty as a result of historic imbalances. We cannot allow the same people to benefit time and again and enriching themselves in the name of empowerment. Honorable Chair, we know as we sit here today, South Africa is one of the most highest inequality society in the world. And in order to redress that, in order to rectify that, we need that our people need to be skilled so that they can come up and they must be part, small business, our people must be part of the mainstream economy. We can't just stay where we are. It's impossible. How can an owner of the country stay poor while they are the owner of a country? It's impossible. And it is unacceptable. We can't have red tape laws that keep our people poor. We can't. We must get our people so that they can become part and reap the fruits of this country, which some of our people have paid with their lives. Blood has been shed. Some of our mothers and fathers and sisters. We need our people to be free economically. I thank you, Chair.
I'll now call upon Honorable Sinclair.
Honorable Deputy Chairperson,
Continue.
the BBBEE bill that we debate today is one of the tools that government believe will address some of the disparities and economic inequalities experienced by South Africa as a society in transformation. The critical question that we need to answer in the context of this debate is, will the BBBEE be one of the structural adjustments that will achieve that? I will use two recent contributions to elucidate on that. Firstly, Chair, Anthea Jeffrey, the head of special research at the South African Institute of Racial Relations, recently said, and I quote, The fact is that no amount of reasonable effort can make the policy work. Attempts by the Department of Trade and Industry to reform BEE also failed to address most of the criticism, unquote. The department's proposed new codes put more emphasis on ownership, to which so much scarce capital has already been assigned. They also set out to make BEE requirements significantly more onerous, based on the unproven assumption that existing rules are too lenient. Investment, growth, and jobs are all likely to suffer, particularly in the already difficult business environment characterized by soaring electricity and other input costs, scarce skills and low productivity, inadequate infrastructure, and the persistent wildcat strikes and labor unrest. Indeed, the state should identify the real barriers to the advancements of the poor and start removing them. This means that the ruling ANC must now embrace much harder tasks, and those are fixing the education, freeing the labor market, building up international competitiveness, and most importantly, Honourable Chairperson, making South Africa much more attractive to investors, both local and foreign. The government, Honourable Minister, needs to shift from this big idea for the last 18 years, and that is that the ANC emphasized redistribution instead of promoting economic growth. But dividing up the existing economic pie without expanding it will never be enough to meet the needs of a growing population. It's about economic growth. But Honourable Deputy Chairperson, this view is reflected by Nigerian billionaire businessman Alioke Dangote. He recently sharply criticized South Africa's BE laws, calling them an obstacle to investment from other African states and a brake on intracontinental trade. He said at the recent South African Business Forum, and I quote, "In Nigeria, we had these laws demanding that any foreign investor had to have a Nigerian partner, but that just dried up the capital flows. Now anyone can do business with anyone in Nigeria." And he criticized that because of the fact that it had a serious impact on the economy of Nigeria. Now, Honourable Minister, the proof lies in the pudding. Nigeria's economy is growing much faster than South Africa's economy, more than 6% this year, compared with South Africa's just over 2%. The gap between the countries has been closing, and as we know, economists predict that Nigeria will take over South Africa between 20 and 2025 as the biggest economy. Why is this? Because they are prepared to not live in the past, but to rather engage the future. The biggest drawback in terms of COPE's approach to this proposed bill is that it fundamentally does three things. It entrenches race in the South African society again. Secondly, it creates a triple BEE commissioner with powers not dissimilar to the Spanish Inquisition. And lastly, it gives the minister unprecedented powers to amend codes and interfere through his appointment, the commissioner. Honourable Chairperson, in conclusion, South Africa's destiny lies in the future and not in our past. As long as we entrench racist codes and prescribe prescriptions, we will not be the winning sustainable nation that was envisioned in 1994. Because of this, COPE remains very sceptical to support this bill. I thank you.
I'll now call upon Honourable Mngoni.
Thank you, Chair. Honourable Minister, colleagues, and House at large. If I can paraphrase the Freedom Charter, it says that the wealth beneath and above the ground shall be shared among those who live in it. That's the ANC fundamental document on economic policy. Chairperson, basically this bill is trying to deracialize the economy because since ever, the economy was based on racial lines. Now, when we as ANC take over, we said that we want to level the play field. And leveling the play field, we need to have some instrument in place. And the broad-based black economic empowerment is one of those instruments to level the play field. As it was studied by Weber and Zell, a renowned company of lawyers and accountants, they found that actually the transactions on broad-based economic empowerment, initially, there's so much complex tax intrications that it leaves the historically disadvantaged individuals with big debts. Now, this bill will make sure that through this code of practice, we'll make sure that these complex tax transactions are eliminated. We've got a Mineral and Petroleum Development Act that states that by 2014, we need 26% of historical disadvantage or black people to be in charge of the mining sector. How does this bill help that? It will help that because it will make sure that those people, they've got access to finance and they are able to have a say in the running of the mines by owning the mines and making sure that they've developed the skills to run the mines. Now, that is addressed by the sector codes that the minister is going to introduce, because the industry, especially the casino industry, those who are in the casino industry, they were complaining that how can they adhere to this bill, if they are dealing with more than 5 sectors. For instance, in gambling, they are also in the hospitality industry. Now, those sectors where they are, if the minister has set up those sectors or the sector councils, that industry in that sector will make sure that it adheres to the codes of that particular sector. If you're in catering, then make sure that you adhere to the codes in that catering sector. So there's no means that you cannot adhere to a code if you are in business, irrespective of whether you are small or big, but the fact is that you must adhere to the code of good practice. This bill makes sure that you adhere to that. And the commissioner that is going to be set into place is to make sure that you follow those regulations accordingly. It's true, Honorable Kunda, that this bill, it must not have, it must not be a tool without teeth. It is going to have teeth because now there is a penalty if you break the rules. If you commit fraud, you claim that the person is in charge of your entity, and only to find that you are only fronting with him, then there'll be also consequences. That is why it's going to bite. In terms of ownership, Honorable Bev, you said the codes are highly problematic. The fact is that before, as the Honorable Chairperson said, it was not just a tick box issue. But this time you have to make sure that you adhere to the codes, you make sure that they are regulated, irrespective of whether you are big or small. The issue that is that you want to see transformation, because unless the bill bites, there won't be transformation. That's why you want to make sure that whoever, whether you're big or small, you have to stick to the bills. Anyway, the bill does deviate anyway that if you are a small entity, if your turnover per annum is 5 million rand, you don't really have to stick to the rules as such. But all other people who are the turnover, it's more than 5 million rand, you have to stick to the rules. That's the only way that you can make this level, this play field to be level. Honorable Sinclair, my dear communist, I call him a communist because as we come a long way with this committee, they say study the past if you divine the future. Now, in the past, we've had these policies that were actually in favor of a minority. Now, to make sure that this bill, it actually addresses the real issues, it's actually being previously, it has been the black people, to be honest, the black people that were at disadvantage. Now, just making sure that the very same people who are at disadvantage, they are on par with everybody else, and then we start this race. in order to grow the economy. Yes, I agree with you that we need to grow the economy. We need to make sure that everybody who's in South Africa gets benefits of the economy. But you cannot do that unless we are all on par. You can quote Nigeria, that Nigeria in 2025 it will be highest, or it will have the highest GDP in Africa. But the fact is that Nigeria is striving because it's basically on oil. They don't diversify their economy. It's growing because Nigeria has got the oil. And so the oil price today, it's actually for the past 3-4 years, it has been very high. So that is why Nigeria is going to be overtaking South Africa in 2025, because the projection is that it will be producing a lot of oil, and it's only oil that will surpass the GDP of South Africa, not that it's the economy satisfied. If perhaps you can reach a peak, as you know, there's a peak in oil. If you can reach that peak, Nigeria, the prediction is that it might fall down because of the peak oil. So if you read properly that, you'll see that Nigeria, it does not diversify its economy, it's on peak oil. Chairperson, we really emphasize redistribution in the ANC because, as I said, we need to level the playing field. We know that we cannot go anywhere unless you grow the economy. This pie needs to grow in order for everybody to benefit. We need to grow the economy in order to alleviate poverty, in order to diminish the inequality. The coefficient is too high, 0.61% is the highest yes in the world. But unless we take a deliberate action as government to regulate and to make sure that we stick by the rules, we won't close this gap of inequality. The poor people will remain poor, the richer will get richer, because we are not firm as government to take action. In every country, whether it's a communist, whether it's capitalist, most investors that look at is stability of the country. As long as there's stability in the country, there's prediction, there's rule of law, people will come and invest because they know that once they invest their money there, they'll get their money back, irrespective of all the hindrances that could be there. But as long as they know that they invest in that country, their money will return, they'll go into that country, irrespective of the political situation. Take, for instance, Zimbabwe. People, they might shout in the media and but you go to Zimbabwe, be there physically, you'll find that a lot of people are trading with Zimbabwe, even in the Western countries, are in Zimbabwe today, trading with Zimbabwe, though they, in the papers, in the media, they talk ill of Zimbabwe. You go to Nigeria as well, there is indigenization. You go to Australia, there is indigenization in the mining. They make sure that they stick to their policy in order to make sure that they improve their countries. So as South Africa, we cannot stand back and wait for God to come and change the thing for us. We have to make sure that we change this economy and we change it to the benefit of everybody. I thank you.
I'll now call on the Minister, Honorable Davis.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and thanks to the majority of members for their constructive comments and for, I think, understanding the direction we're moving in BEE. Participating in this debate has, however, been a bit of an eye-opener because, as was pointed out by the Speaker from the DA, in the National Assembly, the DA unusually, and to the surprise of some of us, said they were going to support this legislation. And now we've been told that that support has now been withdrawn when it comes to this House. Now, if I take what the Honourable Abrams had to say, and I unpack what she had to say, she said that the reason for this flip-flop is that there are things about the codes of good practice which were subsequently introduced which they find unacceptable. She first of all accused me of not acting in good faith in the consultation process. I reject that with utter and complete contempt. We actually went in great detail through the comments, and I personally participated in engagements with the members of the Advisory Council in deciding what we were going to do in terms of the different proposals that were made in the consultation processes. And just to give two examples among several, as a result of the engagements, we did make some changes. I need to tell the Honourable Gamedi that what he said about big companies who don't meet the minimum going down 2 places, that was our original proposal. But following the consultations, we agreed to make it only 1 place down. We did, in fact, listen to what was said. We also introduced a transition period before the new codes will take effect. So I think that it's not true. It's simply not true that we didn't listen in the consultation process. Of course, sometimes in the consultation processes, you have to make a decision. There are some people who don't believe in empowerment at all. And we have to say, well, okay, we've listened to you, but at the end of the day, we have to make a decision. Secondly, the regulatory impact assessment. I'm afraid the DA has got itself into a terrible twist on this one. When there was a discussion in the Portfolio Committee the other day, the department was accused of not conducting a regulatory impact assessment. And then the Director General gave them the regulatory impact assessment. And then we have to come back and hear, well, the regulatory impact assessment didn't take account of all the submissions and now they want to see all of the submissions. What utter and complete nonsense is this? Then the Honourable Abrams says that on the qualifying small enterprises, they now have to comply with all the elements in the scorecard. Again, have you not been reading what is there in the codes? Qualifying small enterprises have to comply with 2 of the 3 compulsory elements, ownership and either enterprise supplier development or skills development. They have to comply with 2, not with 3. I think actually what we're seeing now is we're seeing that the support which was given to this bill in the NA a little while ago was a flash in the pan for electoral opportunistic reasons. That's what it was. The DA stuck its toe into the mainstream, found it uncomfortable, and has now gone back to its comfort zone. And what is its comfort zone? I pointed out in the debate in the National Assembly, the DA voted against the 2003 BEE Act. They voted against it. That is where the DA finds itself historically. The leader of the DA, in an opinion piece in Business Day today, pointed out that he led the charge against employment equity when he was the leader of the DA. That is the DA that we know. Transformation. In the battle for the transformation of this economy and this society, the DA has stood on the... Well, I don't know, sometimes the coach spokesman is not terribly fast. Now Mr. Sinclair comes along and he quotes some funny people from different organizations. It's not redistribution without growth, nor is it growth without redistribution. Draw our market from a small minority of this country. We're going to draw our skills, our leadership, our talent from a small minority. He quoted Mr. Dangote, value to his company, and told this is your empowerment partner. And we said to him, we used to award, actually we're not talking about the same kind of colonial heritage. We're not talking about a large resident population that controls most of the assets in the country. When foreign investors come into Nigeria, they draw on Nigerians as the... Let me just simply say that broadening, not narrowing empowerment. They are about saying that the most fundamental challenge for companies, so that small companies emerging those kinds of activities. And so we actually say tool to achieve broadening of empowerment, and that's exactly why it's there. So I think that with those few remarks, let me thank everybody for the contributions.
That concludes the debate. I shall now put the question, declaration, if they so wish. Do this. Honourable Sinclair, please. I'll now call up. Limpopo. I therefore declare the bill agreed to in terms of Section 65 of the Constitution. Honorable Adams, I corrected you. You can't vote. You're not the head of delegation for Western Cape. And please sit down. Let's proceed.
Honorable Chairperson, if I can address you on what rule can't I vote, because I represented the bill to the Western Cape Legislature and I did the final mandates in the committee and all that, and all the mandates, Chair. So I would like to find out under what rule.
By the Western Cape. Yes.
So then if he's representing the mandate, it's fine, then it's
Honorable Adams, firstly, you never got the mandate from the Western Cape people, but honorable members, as you seated here, Western Cape has voted in favor. So it's 9. That then means 9 provinces have voted in favor. Honorable members. Honorable members, let's proceed. Honorable Sinclair, we are in process here. We now come to the Honorable Ngcobo, is it a point of order?
No, thanks, Honorable Deputy Chairperson. So am I correct then, Chairperson, that the member from Gauteng that was talking there saying representing DA, which at the end she said DA is not accepting, when the Western Cape led by DA has sent a mandate of voting in favor, and also Gauteng, where she comes from, voted in favor, including the DA in the legislation. Thank you.
No, it's more of a statement. Thank you. We now come to the subject for discussions as printed on the order paper. I now call upon the Minister, Honorable Davis.
Chairperson, it's a great pleasure to participate in this discussion. It's down in the order paper as a debate on the National Credit Amnesty, although in Cabinet we have called this the removal of adverse credit information exercise. It's a great pleasure to participate in this debate because this House, and in particular the Select Committee chaired by the Honourable Gamedi, has been very, very instrumental in pushing forward this idea that there should be a process of removing adverse credit information affecting many, many consumers in this country. Now, the National Credit Act was introduced in 2006 with the aim of doing two things. One was facilitating access to credit for a broad section of the South African population. And the second thing was to deal with abusive practices which had plagued the credit market for many, many decades. And I think that what we have seen is that this Credit Act, which provides for quite careful definitions of what is permitted in terms of credit provision and restricts what we call reckless lending, that this Credit Act has had an enormously positive reputation internationally as well as in South Africa. And what we found in the recent years is that there are quite large numbers of people whose names are on credit bureau records as credit impaired, even in cases where they have in fact settled the debt which put them there in the first instance. There are people who are there because their circumstances 10, 15, 20 years ago were very different to what they may be today. They incurred a debt at that stage when they were in conditions of impoverishment, and they found themselves unable to meet a debt. They were placed on the credit bureau listings, and to get off the listings is not an automatic process. It's something that actually requires you to approach a court, sign on with lawyers, and pay a considerable amount in addition to the settlement of the debt concerned. And the implications for people in that position is not just that you find it difficult to access credit. Quite often, it's difficult to access rental property. Quite often, it is a factor which is held against you when you apply for a job. And so I think that what we've found is that there are significant numbers of people who are in that situation. At the same time, what we found is a significant expansion of credit activities in this country, particularly what is called the extension of unsecured lending. Now that has got many, many subcategories, but some of it has involved the extension of credit to low-income working people who are actually not in a position to be able to meet the credit obligations that arise from those transactions. And we've found that too often credit providers find a shortcut. In a sense, what they do is they go to the credit bureaus, they see if someone is on the credit bureau list. If they're on the list, they don't get credit. If they're not on the list, no further affordability assessment is conducted. And what this has meant is it has meant that for people who are not on the list, anything goes. And we found some very, very unfortunate circumstances in the work of the National Credit Regulator. For example, after Marikana, the National Credit Regulator went to that area and found that there were 13 credit providers, 11 of which were non-compliant with one or other aspect of the Credit Act. Sometimes we find that people have had up to 80% and more of their salary, which is impaired in servicing credit agreements. And the way that the credit provider avoids the risk is to simply go and get a garnishee order. So in fact, what you do is you get a deduction, an automatic deduction from the person's wage. The person gets maybe 20% of the wage, and the credit provider doesn't have to concern themselves with a robust affordability assessment, which is basically one of the directions that the Credit Act seeks to take credit providers towards. And so I think that in our discussions, or in the discussions of the department with the Select Committee, we've come up with the idea that as part of the process of addressing this challenge, we should engage in this exercise of removing adverse credit information. The other part of it is contained in amendments to the Credit Act, which are currently before the Portfolio Committee in the National Assembly. And those will require more robust affordability assessments. Those will also require processes of continuous removal. I'll come to those in a minute. But as part of the exercise, we have engaged with the Select Committee, which has proposed that there should be a once-off removal of adverse credit information. We've come up with the term removal of adverse credit information because we need to just make it clear to people that may benefit, and it could be 1.6 million people according to the calculations which have been arrived at. It may be, it is necessary to use this term rather than credit amnesty because, in fact, people who are affected are not exempted from the debt in question. So if you owe somebody money, you still owe them money. You're still obliged to pay them. And if you don't pay them, you'll find yourself back on the credit register after this exercise. But what we are saying, though, is let us remove all this information. Let us, in a sense, create a new blank sheet. The information that is being removed does not include information about the payment profile of the people concerned, and we believe that information on the payment profile of the people concerned, together with an affordability assessment, a more robust affordability assessment, ought to provide the basis on which credit providers can act responsibly in this particular circumstances. And so, in response to the work that's been done, we arrived, or the Select Committee recommended that the option which we should choose is the option that we should remove all adverse information listings irrespective of value and irrespective of non-payment. And then to be included in the new legislation would be an automatic removal of paid-up adverse information listings on an ongoing basis. So as you pay, there should be a simpler and easier and cheaper process to remove that information. If you have a judgment against you and you pay up, similarly, a simpler and easier process for automatic removal of that information. Now, Cabinet endorsed this proposal for public comment, and we went out for public comment, and the closing date was the 31st of October. I can report to the House that the DTI received 98 written comments. 66 of those were in support of the proposal. 15 of those expressed concerns and were not supportive of the proposal, and 17 were posing questions of clarity. Added to that, there were consultations in 6 of the 9 provinces. 3 more still remain to be conducted. And those consultations have also yielded a result in which there is overwhelming favour for this particular measure. The DTI team will be meeting with the Credit Bureau Association next week to discuss some of their concerns and how this measure could be implemented, which basically, as I've indicated, we are of the view that we can mitigate the risk that all of these people who have been credit impaired will suddenly become credit impaired again through a combination of enhanced affordability assessments, which will need to be taking place, and also other interventions such as financial literacy education and so on. So I think that that's where we are at. When we have finished that process, we will take a further proposal to the Cabinet. We don't anticipate this taking longer than a few more months, and hopefully then a final decision on this proposal emanating from this House will be forthcoming. I thank you very much for your attention, and I thank the members of this House for the hard work that they put into this particular process. Thank you.
I'll now call upon Honorable Nyambi.
Honorable Deputy Chairperson, Honorable Minister, Honorable members, guests, let me start by thanking the Minister, the DG, and the officials of the department for the role they played up to this far. I thought it would be proper to premise my speech quoting Martin Luther King. I quote, "An individual has not started living until he can rise above the narrow confines of his individualistic concern to the broader concern of all humanity," close quote. The research result had been presented to the National Credit Regulator Board, which then directed the management of the National Credit Regulator to deliberate the findings with the Department of Trade and Industry. DTI principally supported the views expressed by the NCR in its report. The research showed that the 2006 amnesty, even though it was wide scope, did not really have as much impact as the DTI would have liked because of the global recession in 2008. The aim of the National Credit Amnesty is to effectively regulate the provision of credit in South Africa with a particular focus on protecting consumers, especially from the predatory practices of the capitalist credit grantors, institution of microcredit, loan sharks, and the credit bureaus. Most public servants are blacklisted. There have also been reports of employees using credit information to access potential employees and people not being able to rent accommodation because of impaired credit records. In South Africa today, there is an estimated 2.4 million people blacklisted by credit bureaus. In essence, meaning that they cannot have access to any form of credit. The great majority of blacklisted are workers and poor. The priority of ANC government is to address poverty and the huge challenge of underdevelopment in our country. To this end, ANC government is embarking on a number of measures focusing on the underdeveloped section of our society, including focus on SMMEs and cooperatives. Government's research shows that in South Africa, over 360 billion is provided in credit every year, but the poor pay far more interest. In fact, the lowest income earners pay an average interest rate that is 7 times more than that paid by the rich. High income earners pay an interest rate of around 26% on average for their credit. The lowest income earners pay an incredible 175% average interest rate. Some of the machonistas charge up to 360% interest per annum. For the poor, the official interest rate is only an abstract figure, far from the realities they are faced with. This is akin to credit black market. In essence, the poor are subsidizing the rich. No wonder millions of our people are caught in debt spirals and end up blacklisted. It is time to wipe the slate clean and close this chapter of massive exploitation of the poor. The DTI, National Credit Regulator, National Credit Tribunal, Credit Bureau, and Credit Providers Association made presentation to the Select Committee on progress made since the promulgation of the National Credit Act in relation to the amnesty granted to all qualifying blacklisted consumers. The DTI and NCR stated that the impact of the first credit was very small, although its scope was quite wide. There was a need to revisit the aims and purposes as set out in Section 3 of the NCA and to ask how the playing field could be leveled. One of the ways of doing this will be through the proposed credit information amnesty. The purpose of the proposed credit information amnesty will be to increase access to credit and to help consumers to pay less for their credit. However, it will be difficult to achieve a balance because credit information help credit providers to price their credit. So this will have to be done in a careful, measured way. The aim was also to reduce the cost of credit repair, as it was quite expensive for consumers to sort out their credit records. The National Consumer Tribunal stated that it had seen more than 7,000 consumer credit agreements with a combined value of over 200 million during the last financial year. The consent orders that had been granted by the NCT resulted in consumers being able to retain both immovable and movable properties while servicing their credits in a responsible manner. The number of debt rearrangement applications received was not significant compared to the number of debt and credit agreements in the industry, but a pattern was emerging that will require investigation. Even if the listing was removed, certain consumers who should benefit from amnesty proposal will not have access to credit because they were under debt review. Credit providers, therefore, must be required to do proper credit assessment before extending credit. In cases where a debt had been written off but the record was removed, consumers must access credit beyond their means with adverse implication for the consumer and the credit provider. Our people continue to be excluded from the participation in the economy due to blacklisting by credit bureaus. The removal of adverse information listing is expected to liberate our people and to allow them to access finances for economic participation. We applaud the ANC government for taking decisive steps to remove the barriers created to exclude the majority of South Africans from playing an active role in the quest for socio-economic freedom and emancipation. Having noted these and many other successes of delivery by the ANC government, the progressive ANC government policies and legislation reaffirmed our faith and confidence in the African National Congress as a governing party. Chairperson, it's quite interesting that even of late you can see that parties like COPE, they will quote the Freedom Charter just because it's something that is relevant to them when it suits them. And you'll have people that were not part of the meetings that were organized by the Select Committee, and we have various presenters assisting us to understand because we are quite mindful of what is happening to ordinary masses on the ground. In conclusion, Chairperson, we believe that it is only the African National Congress that can be entrusted with the future of South Africa as already proven, and that it is only the ANC government that can continue with the progressive agenda for Africa and principal contribution to the world politics. I would like to re-emphasize the fact that amnesty proposal is aiming at reducing credit impairment by addressing its cause, allowing for restorative justice, and aim also to redress the failures of credit providers to make proper assessment of risk. The credit amnesty is also intended to address overpricing, stimulate economic growth, and address some of the barriers to credit. I thank you, Chairperson.
Honorable Abraham. Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. I see I've got lots of spectators and audiences here. And yeah. Good afternoon, Honorable Minister, once again, Honorable members, and Honorable guests in the gallery. Honorable Deputy Chairperson, will South Africans and the economy really benefit from the 2013 credit amnesty? And is it impaired credit record to an only ill in the secured and unsecured credit market? Of the 16 million people compromised credit records, more than 9 million have more debt than what they can afford to pay off every month. Access to credit is central to economic growth and thereby individual access to building personal assets over long term, rising out of one level of society to a better position. Creating small businesses and employment. For this credit market to stimulate growth, it needs to be well regulated, reasonably affordable, and customer educated on all the aspects of these loans. The main issue revolves around illegal loan operators in the market, also known as the Mashonisas, and better known as loan sharks, who charge any interest rate and actually rob the borrowers. The removal of adverse credit information held by credit institutions, which, if forced through as currently proposed, will adversely affect the SMME sector and jobs. Many good noises are made, such as the Cabinet statement to say the Credit Amnesty, open quote, seeks to address the issue of access to credit to those South Africans that can afford credit, close quote. And Cabinet spokeswoman Pumla Williams saying, open quote, inaccessible or expensive credit hinders growth. Access to the sustainable credit market is essential to all development goals, close quote. Honourable Deputy Chairperson, how are we going on procedure on this project? The actuarial report on this project was not submitted to the Select Committee of Trade and International Relations, and the DTI only presented a watered-down slide presentation. The DTI informed the DA that the document was before Cabinet and therefore could not be revealed. The DA's PAIA application for this document is way overdue and still outstanding in spite of Cabinet now having approved the project. A Government Gazette Notice 966 of 2013 was published by the Department on 30th September, inviting public comment on the proposed removal of adverse credit information on this project. The closing date for the comments was the 31st of October 2013. Today we are debating this project. What will the effects of the public comment be after the whistle is gone? Will they still influence the process, or are the boxes merely tick boxes? Warning from the industry. The credit industry warned and objected to the second round repeat process for several reasons. The 2007 Credit Amnesty, Honourable Deputy Chairperson, did not have the desired effect. In fact, 74% of those pardoned are now defaulting on payments. Clearing the adverse credit information will increase the cost of credit, could close small credit providers, and will certainly affect SMMEs who are creating the most jobs in local and rural communities. Proposals, according to the notice of 966 of 30th September, removal of all adverse information listings held by credit bureaus irrespective of value and irrespective of non-payment. Removal of all paid adverse information listings by the credit bureaus on an ongoing basis, and removal of all paid up judgments information held by credit bureaus on an ongoing basis. The contradiction to the Select Committee agreement lies in...
Just hold on for a minute. Honourable Tau. Try next door.
No, thank you very much, Chair. I wanted to check with the member whether if she can take a question.
No, thank you. Maybe over lunch. Remove on his account. Removal of all paid up adverse information listings by the Credit Bureau on an ongoing basis. Removal of all paid up judgments information held by credit bureaus on an ongoing basis. The contradiction to the Select Committee agreement lies in irrespective of non-payment. This is not what was agreed to. In fact, Session B was agreed to, removal of all paid up adverse information listings. Technically, one cannot agree on both, especially with the ongoing basis. Will encourage non-payment of any debt about the amnesty, and thereafter the risk of new credit will increase the cost to both high and low risk borrowers. Yet, even if adverse credit records will be removed, it does not exempt the borrowers from making all the payments due to the creditor. Jobs are at risk. The potentially high-risk borrowers without adverse credit information will be labelled as high-risk clients who, because of the high percentage of defaulters in the market, will be instrumental in the cost factor of credit. The good high-risk borrowers are those who need an opportunity in life, but will now have to pay a high, unaffordable price for the credit without any credit records that would, under normal circumstances, have improved household circumstances for the better. This leaves development goals at risk. The low-risk SMME will have to pay the same costly rate for credit, which is now governed by the risk factor of the high-risk borrowers. Credit will become inaccessible. This is where the job market will be affected adversely, as it will become too expensive to borrow money to create jobs. Cabinet statements refer to credit to those who can afford it, but what is the price going to be? Very high rates, the SMME sector doomed in the economy, jobs at risk. Honourable Minister, could you be shooting job creation in the foot? Cabinet itself said, and I quote, inaccessible or expensive credit hinders growth. Access to the sustainable credit market is essential to all development goals. Close quote. I thank you, Siyabonga. Dankie. Honorable Dechale.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Maybe before I start, I should tell these honorable members that when we were in our committee meeting, okay, thank you. When we were in our committee meeting, the DA did not support the bill. They are saying to our people, even if you're facing problems like maybe facing problems just like they are in a, just like they are like a sea, they are saying to the people, take a bucket of water and try to take out those problems. So I am saying the DA is not taking care of our people, but the ANC is here to help them. Credit is a key. I'm talking about what happened in the committee meeting. Credit is a key enabling mechanism for investment and development. For many of our people, it is one of the significant ways for them to access opportunities to better their lives. Access to credit spurs consumers' spending and serves as a key driver of economic growth. Historically, access to credit in South Africa was characterized by many factors other than the ability for repayment. For many years, our people were subjected to discriminatory access to credit because they were black and poor. Those who were given access to credit were made to repay exorbitant amounts and highly discriminatory credit arrangements compared to the rest of the population of South Africa. It is for this reason that we adopted the National Credit Act of 2005 to promote responsible credit granting and use, and for that purpose to prohibit reckless credit granting in 2008. We also adopted the Consumer Protection Act of 2008, which seeks to promote a fair, accessible, and sustainable marketplace for consumer products and services, and for that purpose to establish national norms and standards relating to consumer protection. We did this in order to provide for improved standards of consumer information and to prohibit certain unfair discriminatory treatment of our people by credit providers. Despite all these initiatives, our people continue to face discriminatory access to credit in many instances. Many credit providers have taken the opportunity to exploit the economic conditions of our people and lend them to other indebtedness. This, coupled with a difficult economic situation that faced many workers across the globe, including in South Africa, has resulted in many people defaulting in their credit. In many instances, impaired credit records have resulted in expensive credit for our people. As the ANC, we have said we need to reduce credit impairment by addressing its causes. We need to ensure that credit impairment is not used to be a barrier for our people to access economic opportunities, goods and products that will enable them to change their lives and those of families, such as housing, business opportunities, education, etc. As the ANC, we have said we need to remove barriers to credit and assisting those consumers who can afford credit to access credit. We need to embark on restorative justice system that will give our people an opportunity to restart their adverse credit information. Guided by the objectives of the National Credit Act, we need to assist consumers impacted by economic recession. It is our responsibility as government and parliament, redress failure of credit providers, to consider broader economic factors that have rendered our people in the most difficult economic situations. In many instances, adverse economic information has been used by employers to determine whether to employ them or not. It is for this reason that we say, in order to fight unemployment and systematic discrimination of our people because their economic conditions, we need to remove adverse credit information, which has proven to be one of the barriers to employment for young people throughout the country. We need to ensure that our people are not made to endure overpriced goods and services because of the adverse information held by credit providers. Removing credit information will not only stimulate economic growth, but also broaden access to credit providers. Removal of all paid-up adverse information and paid-up judgments on an ongoing basis will benefit over 1.516 960 consumers. Removal of all adverse information and paid-up adverse information listings irrespective of value and irrespective of non-payment benefit over 1.605763 of consumers. This will ensure that these households are able to be active participants of the economy. They will be able to buy houses for their families. They will be able to borrow money to send their children to school. They will be able to borrow money to start small business initiatives and thus be self-sufficient. We are aware that there are those whose lives were privileged that maybe will think that we are reckless and irresponsible. We want to say it without a shred of doubt that in many countries such as Brazil, these measures have not only changed the lives of the people but also resulted in economic growth. We shall ensure that government unleash all its resources to ensure that credit providers conduct more comprehensive affordability assessments in order not to render about indebtedness. Honorable Davis, we want to congratulate your department for championing the plight of our people. We want to reassure you that this initiative will not change the lives of our people, but also those of their families and communities. I thank you.
Honorable Sinclair.
Honorable Deputy Chairperson, this is and can be a very emotional debate if we really address the issue. And the issue at stake is not about credit or amnesty. The issue at stake is what type of society are we trying to build? Now, Chairperson, we know the realities out there. We know the realities out there. We know the realities of our people that's so poor and marginalized that they're desperate. But in all reality, we must say that we must be careful to engage on a debate which thinks that there will be a magic wand of debt that will address the ills of our society. That certainly can never be true. Now, Chairperson, I've always presented myself as a capitalist with a social conscience. I'm not a socialist with a capital conscience, like some of the previous members that stands here and pretend and masquerade if they're speaking on behalf of the poor. But the reality is that if we don't address the poor in our country, we will create serious, serious challenges. And those challenges will lead to the establishment of parties like the Economic Freedom Front that now pretend to speak on the poor. So government, the ANC government, and for the fact of the matter, all of us, has got the obligation to answer the critical question, and that is, are we prepared to build a solid and prosperous middle class? That is the question that we need to answer. And in terms of the debate, Honourable Minister, about how our collective path to building a credit-healthy society, how we can achieve that. And this debate has got two elements. The first one deals with the aspect of credit. Now, Chairperson, the reality is, not just in South Africa, but worldwide, we live in a debt-ridden society. And the reality of debt is that if you do not manage debt, debt manage you. Now, what I heard earlier from the previous honourable member is that people will borrow money. The fact of the matter, it's not about borrowing money, it's about paying back the money that you lend. That is the critical issue. And in terms of credit and the availability of credit, many of our people in our society are so indebted that they're desperate and that they can't move or survive. Now, COPE, as a party that was built on the principles of the Freedom Charter, we say, and that's our position, we're very specific that we support this, And to achieve that, Honourable Chairperson.
Can you hold it? Honourable Member. There's one next to.
Thank you. Can a member take a question?
Chairperson, I know the honourable member doesn't get a lot of opportunity to speak in his caucus, so I'm not going to give him the opportunity. Chairperson, so coming to the issue about amnesty, if we agree that it's necessary to deal with the issue of amnesty, COPE pleads for a structured approach and process. And in terms of that, Honourable Minister, the first issue is the capacity of the courts to deal with the administrative process. The question that I want to raise is the capacity of the courts to deal with the process as you envisage, is it there? Then the second one is, Chairperson, the role of banks and credit providers. As we speak now, the exposure of banks is almost 1.25 trillion rand. And we certainly can't tamper with the fact that if you don't pay back your loan and you become critically impaired, that you are a risk. No investor, not in South Africa, not in Zimbabwe, not in America, likes risk. And it's necessary to address the issue about the roles and the credit providers. But lastly, Chairperson, and that is the role of the National Credit Regulator, is we
Honourable
must...
Member, will you wrap up because your time is over?
Thank you very much. I know you like me, Chairperson. That's why I will finish now. Honourable
You're
Chairperson.
wasting time.
Honourable Chairperson. Honourable Chairperson. The issue about affordability and measures that need to be in place are of crucial importance to make sure that we create a society that we all want to live in, and that is a prosperous society. I thank you.
Honourable Adams.
Honourable Chairperson, Honourable Minister, Honourable Members, ladies and gentlemen. Chairperson, in today's business day, and I want to quote, opens the quote, "Take pride in what we have achieved and raise the bar," close quote. So that already gives a very good sign, points, and marks of what the ANC government, this ANC-led government, is doing and is busy doing and will still continue doing until thy kingdom come. Chairperson, Chairperson, the Honourable Sinclair was saying that COPE was built on the principles of the Freedom Charter. But COPE hasn't got any principles. Their principles are crafted out by the court. They still hasn't got any policies, Chairperson. So how can an honourable member come and stands on this podium, Chairperson, and says that their principles has been built on the Freedom Charter, where people like yourself, Chairperson, people like all other veterans in the country and in this house and all around the globe that fought for this democracy with blood, sweat and tears, that has paid for their lives in this democracy, that has built and written the Freedom Charter in blood, that they were shot at and beaten up while writing the founding principles of the Freedom Charter. And then COPE wants to take that chance and says that they are standing on that principalities. No, Chairperson, I think the member, with all due respect, must have his head read, or he must go for political education. In the ANC, we can give him free political education. We can even provide him with copies of Umkhabulas and all that, Chairperson. Chairperson.
Just a minute. Honourable Sinclair.
I just want to ask the honourable member if it's true if he was the first black organizer for the National Party.
Well, Honourable Sinclair, it's good that you decided to sit down before you're given an order. Continue.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, the fact of the matter is, Chair, you know, there's a saying that if you leave your mother's and father's house, you are going into the wilderness. You are going into the darkness because you have left your parents' house to go and seek for greener pastures which are not there. And unfortunately, the Honorable St. Clair is bewildered. He's in the wilderness, Chair, because he left the African National Congress while we took a decision to join the African National Congress, and while we took a decision to be under the discipline of this African National Congress, Chair, while we took a decision, all of us, to become disciples of the African National Congress and preach the gospel of the African National Congress, he wandered off. That's why he's in the wilderness and asked these silly questions which has got no relevance to the debate that we are debating today, Chair. And yes, I'm a disciplined cadre of this African National Congress, Honorable St. Clair. No more other titles and things hanging around. I'm under the discipline of the African National Congress, Chair. Chairperson, the Honorable Abrams was saying, and she was quoting here a lot of things, which I think the Honorable Abrams was very reluctant with the truth, deviating a lot away from the truth, what happened in the committee, Chair. This committee has started with this thing, Chair, in 2012 already. And Chair, Honorable Abrams was in the meetings. Now, I'm not sure whether she sees the Honorable Watson in the gallery that she now decided to take a different angle and a role. Because we were briefed by the Banking Association, Chair. We were briefed by the National Credit Regulator. We were briefed by the Lawyers Association, Chair. We were briefed by the Casino Association. We were briefed by the Lending Association of South Africa. We were briefed as a committee by all these various people with the DTI and everybody. But now to come and stand there and says that we were not briefed, Chair, that is totally misleading the House. That is totally misleading the House. And Chair, and if we even asked for a study of the credit amnesty, which was done not in August as the Honourable Member, or in October as the Honourable Member said here, but the study was done by February, March 2013. And the DTI then considered the report internally in March 2013, the end of March. So Chairperson, what does the ANC want? There was even said, Chair, and Cabinet approved this on the 4th of September, if I can just refresh the Honourable Member's memory, because it seems to me that the Democratic Alliance has got a short space of memory, or only selective memory, Chair. That's why in the Western Cape, in the Vlakte, they are called the Diermekaar Alliance, and even somewhere in the Eastern Cape, they are called the Daga Alliance, and all these things, Chair. So, Chair, the committee considered, Chair, and a study was conducted by Francis Nathan Okerud on access to credit by the poor in South Africa. And Chair, the Honourable Abrams, the Honourable Gunda, the Honourable St. Clair knows that their constituency wants this. Their constituency wants this, Chair. Because this ANC government is a caring ANC government. That is what it is, Chair. Even the Commissioner, Honourable Commissioner, he knows that in his constituency, in the rural areas, Chair, in the rural provinces, they want this, Chair. They need this.
Okay, just hold on. Honourable members, it's going to be a very long day. Can we just concentrate on the debate? Thank you.
On access to credit by poor in South Africa. Oh.
Continue.
Thank you, Chair. By the poor in South Africa, evidence from household surveys data shows that about 90% of households in South Africa had no access to any form of credit. It needs to be noted that in most instances, the majority of the people who accessed credit were largely in the semi-formal financial institutions. The most worrying factor was that the study showed that a large proportion of poor households have less access to credit. In many instances, the poor were more likely to access informal credit, which is characterized by high interest rates, and thus increase the cost of the credit. Despite several claims by some people that it's easy for South Africans to access credit, the lived reality of our people is that they are not able to access formal credit. And to access formal credit and regulated to unscrupulous loan sharks and business that render their lives unbearable. In fact, a study by Francis Nathan Okoret shows that the majority of the poor are forced seeking semi-formal credit because of adverse economic information on their names, Honorable Sinclair. Chairperson, the distribution of sample households within each province by the different credit sources reflects the same trend as at the national level, where most households do not have access to credit, and the main source of credit was the semi-formal financial sector. I hope the Honorable Abrams listened, Chairperson. Mpumalanga had the highest proportion of households, 94.3, with no access to any form of credit. Access to bank credit was highest in the Western Cape. Households in the Eastern Cape and Northwest had highest access to semi-formal credit, while it was the households in Mpumalanga, 21.2%, informal credit was mainly accessed by households in the Eastern Cape and in Mpumalanga. Among the non-poor within each province, those located in the Western Cape have the highest likelihood of accessing formal credit. With regards to semi-formal credit, the non-poor located in Northwest, 12.8%, and in Mpumalanga, 25.5%, had a higher probability of access among the formal credit as compared to other provinces. However, the poor in the Eastern Cape, 22.5%, and Gauteng, 7.6%, had a higher probability of informal access credit. Black households had a higher likelihood of having no access to credit compared to other races. The gender decomposition suggests that access to bank credit was higher among male-headed households as compared to female-headed households. On the main axis, credit shows that access to credit has a racial, gender, class, and geographic phase. The blacks, the poor, and women are largely affected to credit. It is no surprise that the Honorable Abrams are defending the policies of the DA because the DA has got no respect for gender policies. Honorable Chairperson, as the ANC, we rise to welcome the support the initiative to remove adverse credit information to allow our people to make a new economic start. Contrary to what many of the privileged amongst us have said, the removal of adverse credit information will enable our people to be active participants of the economy. They will be able to access housing loans and many to start small businesses, initiatives, and send their kids to school. It will ensure that our people are given an opportunity to break with the past and find other creative ways to support their families. Chairperson, if we could see that the world is looking at us as South Africa. This ANC-led government has come a long way. In 20 years, have done a lot. More needs to still to be done. But we can thank the ANC-led government, Chair, for guiding and leading the way. If we would have had any other government, I don't know what would have happened. But I want to say to the Minister, to our Chairperson of our committee, Honorable Gamede, to all the ANC comrades of the committee, all the ANC comrades in the House, and everybody that has worked hard, the department under the guidance and leadership of Director General Lionel October, we want to thank them for leading the way and paving the way so that people in South Africa stands by the slogan and the promises of the ANC, a better life for all. I thank you.
Honorable Chane.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, during the debate by Honorable Adams, an assertion was made that another honorable member over there has deliberately misled the House. And that was supported by the facts of what happened in the meeting. And that has not been rebutted. Now, I would want to know if it is parliamentary for an honorable member to deliberately mislead the House. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Chane, when the respective
Member Abrams took the stand, you never raised a point of order.
Yes.
And as it is right now, there have been other people who've actually been involved in the debate. Now, are you expecting me to now do the retrospective move?
No, Chair. The fact that she...
Is it a statement and not a point of order? If that be the case, I will accept it. Thank you. I'll now call upon Honorable Davis.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you to members of the Council for the overwhelming support, I think, which you have given to this process. I think I would just want to start by saying that the fundamental motive for this is that on the register of people who are credit impaired are people who are poor working people who have been pressured into credit transactions that they shouldn't have got involved in the first place. There are also, and Honourable Sinclair was talking about a solid and prosperous middle class, there are people who are now in the middle class who were previously in those circumstances and have a record deriving from that period which is hard for them to shake off as they are in a different situation. And I think that, so we've got people, in short, who shouldn't be on a list of people who are credit impaired. It's not their fault, they shouldn't be there. At the same time, a list of people who is credit impaired is not providing a basis on which there can be an adequate countering of the tendency to prey on low-income people through practices which, maybe not in the strict legal sense of the term, but in the broadest generic sense of the term, are actually reckless lending. There is not an adequate basis to rely on this record as a means of determining whether or not a particular transaction should take place. And so as I tried to describe it, we've got people in this situation, 1.6 million odd people, and then we've got practices which are, if you're not on the list, anything goes. People are not conducting proper affordability assessments. And so what we need to do is address both of those factors. That's what it is. Deal with the impairment of people that are on this register as credit impaired. Deal with it in a way which is responsible. We're not saying to those people, and let me repeat, we are not saying that your debt is cancelled. You still are required to pay the debt. If you pay the debt, then we will have a regular process of getting you off the list more easily than we have up to now. That will be provided for in the new legislation. And that this will enable those people to have a fresh start, which affects not only their ability to get credit, but to rent properties, we've already said, get employment, and so on. So I think most of the contributors understood this. I think the DA is going to have to learn not to try to put up process red herrings to hide the real positions that they support. Last time round, it was that we hadn't acted in good faith, we had disregarded all the submissions on the BEE codes, and we hadn't conducted the regulatory impact assessment. I tried to show all of those were nonsense. This time round, it was that we didn't provide the select committee with all the information from the actuarial study. What nonsense. What is fundamentally underlying this is that you are turning around to 1.6 million people who are credit impaired and say we don't care about your plight. It's the same argument as you have put forward when you say that you don't care if farm workers get paid 65 Rand a day rather than 105 Rand a day. It's the same argument as you put forward just now when you say you don't support a broadening of BEE. Come on, I think that the fig leaf is extremely flimsy. We can all see through it. We know where you stand, and I think that you've shown your colours on this particular issue as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Honourable Minister, for availing yourself. And that concludes the debate. The Secretary will read the second order of the day.
Consideration of report of Select Committee on Trade and International Relations, Southern African Development Community SADC Protocol on Trade Services.
I'll now call upon Honourable Adams.
Honourable Deputy Chairperson, the Select Committee dealt with the South African, or were briefed by the Department of Trade and Industry. Department of International Relations and Corporations. My apologies, Chairperson. I don't want to mislead the House. It's the Department of International Relations and Corporations, which they call DIRCO. The SADC PTS is envisioned in the 1996 SADC Treaty, Article 21 and 22 on areas of cooperation, and in the SADC Trade Protocol, Article 23, Trade Services. The overall objective is to promote regional integration in SADC by creating a single market for service trade. The protocol sets out the legal framework for trade in services and required ratification by 2/3 of SADC members to enter into force. It is based on the WTO General Agreement on Trade in Services, which allows for preferential services trade agreements amongst members. The objectives is, Chairperson, to promote sustainable economic growth and development in the SADC region, enhance economic diversification and investment in the services economies of the region, lateralize intra-regional trade in services on the basis of mutual benefit, and eliminate substantially all discrimination in services trade between members. Create a single market for trade in services, preserve the right to regulate, and to introduce new regulation. Chairperson, the Select Committee on Trade and International Relations, led by Honourable Didi Gamede, have considered the request for approval by Parliament to ratify the South African Development Community Protocol on Trade Services in terms of Section 2312 of the Constitution 1996, and we recommend to the Council in terms of Section 2312 of the Constitution to approve the said protocol. I thank you.
That concludes the debate. Shall now put the question that the report be agreed to in accordance with Rule 71. I shall first allow provinces the opportunity to make their declaration of vote, if they so wish. We shall now proceed to the voting on the question. I shall do this in alphabetical order per province. Heads of delegation will vote by pressing in favor, against, or abstain. I now call on the provinces Eastern Cape, Free State, Gauteng, KZN.
In favor.
Limpopo.
In favor.
Mpumalanga.
In favor.
Northern Cape.
Northern Cape, Yadumalazan.
Northwest.
Dear Chair.
Western Cape.
Voted, Chairperson.
I'll close the voting. 9 provinces have voted in favor. I therefore declare the report agreed to in terms of Section 65 of the Constitution. The Secretary will read the third order of the day.
Consideration of Africa Institute of South Africa Act Repeal Bill B6B 2013 and report of Select Committee on Education and Recreation thereon.
I'll now call upon Honorable Makate.
Thank you, Deputy Chairperson. Deputy Chairperson, the Africa Institute of South Africa was established in 1960 as a non-profit organization. Its research output on policy matters affecting South Africa sympathized with apartheid in South Africa and provided advisory services to other countries willing to associate with the apartheid government. The Africa Institute was used to secure support from other countries for apartheid government. Under the democratic dispensation, the Africa Institute of South Africa has been undergoing reconceptualization. The focus is on turning Africa Institute into an organization whose competency in research on South Africa and evidence-based policy briefs can be used to inform South African policy on the African continent. In 2004, through the Minister of Science and Technology, the Department of Science and Technology took on the responsibility for the administration of the Africa Institute of South Africa Act. An institutional review that took place in 2010 discovered a mismatch between the strategic role and functions of the Africa Institute in relation to the core mandate of the department. Upon reviewing the structure and functions of Africa Institute, the department identified that the institute had significant overlaps with the Human Science Research Council relating to mandates and operational activities. There was some consideration about a possible merger of the two bodies, but it was eventually deemed appropriate to incorporate the Africa Institute into Human Science Research Council because the institute is smaller. The Africa Institute of South Africa Act Repeal Bill B6B of 2013 seeks to respond to the prevailing overlaps in an efficient manner. Further, the bill promotes alignment of the Institute's role and activities within the department broad mandate in line with the recommendations from the 2010 institutional review. The draft repeal bill was introduced to Parliament on the 15th March 2013. It provides for the establishment of Africa Institute of South Africa and also gives powers to the Minister of Science and Technology to provide for the transfer of assets, liabilities, rights, and obligations of the institution to the Human Science Research Council. The draft repeal was approved by the Portfolio Committee on Science and Technology in June 2013. The bill, which is a Section 75, and in terms of the Constitution, it does not affect provinces. The bill was presented before the Select Committee on Education and Recreation for approval. The Select Committee, having considered the bill, recommends that the House approve the Africa Institute of South Africa Act Repeal Bill B6B 2013. I thank you.
That concludes the debate. I shall now put the question that the bill be agreed to in accordance with Rule 63. I shall first allow political parties to make their declaration, if they so wish. We shall now proceed to the voting on the question. Members will vote by pressing in favor, against, or abstain. Any problems? Voting is closed. It's everybody's vote. Everybody voted. 3-0. Have voted. I therefore declare the bill agreed to in terms of Section 75 of the Constitution.
Thank you.
The Secretary will read the fourth and the fifth orders of the day.
Consideration of Merchant Shipping International Oil Pollution Compensation Fund Bill B19B of 2013 and report of Select Committee on Public Service thereon, and consideration of Merchant Shipping Civil Liability Convention Bill B20B of 2013 and a report of Select Committee on Public Services thereon.
I'll now call upon Honorable Sibande.
Thank you, Chairperson. The Select Committee considered and approved these bills on the 8th October 2013. We received the representation on the bills from the Department of Transport and took note of the corrective amendments that the Portfolio Committee on Transport made. The committee engaged with both the department and the Maritime Safety Authority. It also considered implication and continuing with the old status quo related to the provisions of the International Convention on Civil Liability for Oil Pollution Damage of 29 November 1969. It further interrogated the benefits to the country, the shipping industry, and the economy and environment at large if the two pieces of legislation were passed. The passing of the two bills would enact, in the case of the Merchant Shipping Civil Liability Convention Bill of 2013, the International Maritime Organization Protocol of 1992 is amended that the International Convention on Civil Liability for Oil Pollution Damage of 29 November 1969 into law. It is part of the comprehensive package of measures that are designed to ensure that our country can perform its obligation under the Convention on Civil Liability for Oil Pollution Damage and the International Maritime Organization Protocol of 1992 to amend the International Convention on the establishment of an international fund for the compensation of the oil pollution damage 1971. In the case of merchant shipping, the International Oil Pollution Compensation Fund Bill 2013, the International Maritime Organization Protocol of 1992, to amend the International Convention on the establishment of an international fund for the compensation for oil pollution damage 1971 into law. It is part of the comprehensive package of the measures that are designed to ensure that our country can perform its obligations under the Fund Convention and the International Maritime Organization Protocol of 1992 to amend the International Convention on Civil Liability for Oil Pollution Damage 1969. Note that the Parliament has already approved the two protocols referred to above under Section 231(2) of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa 1996. The Select Committee on the Public Services is satisfied with the provision of the two bills and herewith reports that it has adopted the two bills to give effect to its role as a committee of the National Council of Provinces so that Council can further process its enactment. I thank you.
That concludes the debate. I shall now put the question in respect of the fourth order, that the bill be agreed to. In accordance with Rule 63, I shall first allow political parties to make their declaration of vote if they so wish. We shall now proceed to the voting on the question. Members will vote by pressing in favor, against, or abstain. Okay, the voting will close. Majority of members voted in favor. May I do the same with the second one, mentioned the Shipping Civil Liability Convention will follow the same process. In accordance with Rule 63, I shall first allow political parties to make their declaration of vote if they so wish. We shall now proceed to the voting on the question. Members will vote by pressing in favor. Huh? Are you able to revive? Yeah or nay? Just try again. It's working. Okay. Can we vote? Thank you.
27 majority.
Majority has voted in favor.
Declare the bill. I therefore declare the bill.
Majority members have voted in favor. I therefore declare the bill agreed to in terms of Section 75 of the Constitution. Secretary will read the sixth order of the day.
Consideration of report of Select Committee on Security and Constitutional Development, budget, APP, and strategic plans of the Department of Correctional Services.
I'll now call upon Honorable Mogobi.
Honorable Chairperson, thank you very much, and honorable members. The Select Committee on Security and Constitutional Development, having considered the annual performance plan, strategic plan, and the budget vote of the Department of Correctional Services, reports as follows: that it satisfies the constitutional obligation, together with its 4 legislative requirements: Correctional Service Act, Correctional Matters Amendment Act, the Criminal Procedures Act, White Paper on Correctional Service. The budget of the Department of Correctional Service has grown over time up to 20,795,3 billion in 2015. The committee also looked into the program of the department in terms of its implementation. We have 5 programs. Programs 1, administration, incarceration, corrections, care program, and social integration. Key issues were raised by the committee, and the committee, after analyzing, engaged with the department to address and to amend, has satisfied itself, and therefore the committee recommends that 1, the department should fill all vacant posts provide the committee with a copy of findings of the ministerial tax team within 90 days, apply the provisions of the travel policy fairly, report which matters it has legally defended, make available its human resource development strategy, roll out the TP screening equipment throughout the country, train warders to be able to better handle the new situation in correctional service. Therefore, the committee recommends for approval. Thank you.
Debate, I shall now put the question. The question is that the report be agreed to. In accordance with Rule 71, I shall first allow provinces the opportunity to make their declarations of vote, if they so wish. We shall now proceed to the voting on the question. I shall do this in alphabetical order per province. Heads of delegation will vote by pressing in favor, against, or abstain buttons. Eastern Cape, Free State, Gauteng, KwaZulu-Natal, Mpopo,
Re dumellana le yona.
Mpumalanga, Northern Cape,
Siphethe.
Northwest,
Voted, Chair.
and Western Cape.
Voted, Chair.
Have all the heads of delegation voted? If so, voting will now close. All 9 provinces voted in favor. I therefore declare the report agreed to in terms of Section 65 of the Constitution. The Secretary will read the 7th order of the day.
Consideration of report of Select Committee on Security and Constitutional Development, Domestic Violence reports as presented by the Civilian Secretariat for Police Service.
I now call upon Honorable Mogobi.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, and once more, honorable members. Report by the Select Committee on Security and Concert Development on the Domestic Violence Report as presented by Civilian Secretariat for Police Service dated 9 October 2013. The introduction comply with Section 1, Section 6, Subsection 1, and Subsection C of Civilian Secretariat for Police Service. The implementation challenges were identified, amongst others, issues of community service center, issues of incident forms, issues of difficulties in management of escapes. The committee further looked into the recommendation by Civilian Secretariat for Police Services and urged that the department should look into all those recommendations that were raised by Secretariat. Amongst others is the flow chart, the issue of review, issues of undesigned checklist, it should be redesigned again, issues of non-compliance forms, those are issues that the committee looked into them. Issues of recording of domestic violence incident, which is very important. South African Police Service members who perpetuate domestic violence also has to be looked with a critical eye with the view of correcting or, if needs be, letting justice to take its course. After the committee has considered all this, the Select Committee on Security therefore recommend as follows. 1, review the training content of Domestic Violence Act in police training colleges and report back to the committee within 3 months. Determine the reasons for the non-implementation of the Domestic Violence Act at the station level and report back to committee within 3 months. 3, provide a report to the committee within 3 months on the reasons for high levels of withdrawal of Domestic Violence Act complaints by complainants. We therefore recommend the committee for approval.
That concludes the debate. I shall now put the question. The question is that the report be agreed to in accordance with Rule 71. I shall first allow provinces the opportunity to make their declarations of vote if they so wish. We shall now proceed to the voting on the question. I shall do this in alphabetical order per province. Heads of delegation will vote by pressing in favor, against, or abstain buttons. Eastern Cape, Free State, Gauteng, KwaZulu-Natal,
Sayamukela, Chair.
Limpopo,
Redumelana Leono.
Mpumalanga,
Voted.
Northern Cape,
Vote in favor.
Northwest,
Voted, Chair.
Western Cape.
Voted, Chair.
Have all the heads of delegation voted? If so, voting will now close. All 9 provinces voted in favor. I therefore declare the report agreed to in terms of Section 65 of the Constitution. The Secretary will read the 8th order of the day. 8 and 9, both 8 and 9.
A consideration of Basic Conditions of Employment Amendment Bill, B15B of 2012, and of Report of Select Committee on Labor and Public Enterprises. Consideration of Labor Relations Amendment Bill, B16B of 2012, and of Report of Select Committee on Labor and Public Enterprises.
I now call upon Honorable Temba.
Thank you, Chairperson. Honorable Chair, honorable members. The Select Committee on Labour and Public Enterprises, in keeping with our commitment and obligation to afford our people an opportunity to influence and shape the legislation that we pass, we invited interested people, stakeholders to submit written comments and public submissions on the Basic Conditions of Employment Amendment Bill, Bill B15 of 2012, and Labour Relations Amendment Bill B16B of 2012. These are two very important bills, even for us as members sitting in this House. I understand some of us here are employers. We must listen very carefully. The committee considered these submissions, which in many ways enriched our discussions and understanding of the two bills and the challenges that are still facing many workers, especially those in temporary employment. The Basic Conditions of Employment Amendment Bill proposes amendments that seek to assist trade unions which have historically struggled to secure representativity in certain sectors due to the structure of the workplace in those sectors. It empowers the minister to prescribe a threshold for union representativity within industries that are subject to sectoral determination. This will allow trade unions to automatically acquire organizational rights in all workplaces where covered by the sectoral determination upon achieving a prescribed threshold or representativity in that sector. Whereas the Basic Condition of Employment Amendment Act currently does not provide for minimum wages or minimum wage increases, the proposed amendments allow the minister to make sectoral determination for any employee, not only covered an existing sectoral determination. The minister may, in terms of such general sectoral determination, set minimum wages or minimum wage increases, which may therefore apply to all employees. The Basic Condition of Employment Amendment Act amendments also aim to streamline the mechanisms used to enforce compliance with the Basic Condition of Employment Amendment Act. The amendments aim to do away with the current mechanism which provided an employer may inter alia object to compliance order issued by the Department of Labor and may appeal against compliance orders made by the Director General of the Department of Labor. According to the bill, any failure to comply with a compliance order would constitute contempt of court. The amendments also remain committed to the minister's stated intention to further criminalize Basic Conditions of Employment Amendment Act contraventions. To this end, the minister has proposed increasing the maximum terms of imprisonment to 6 years for specific contraventions. Maximum fines will also increase to between 300 rands and 1,500 for specific Basic Conditions of Employment Amendment Act contravention. Amendments were proposed to give the Labor Ministers power to intervene to halt exploitation of vulnerable workers. This bill seeks to give the Minister of Labor the power to be able not only to increase the minimum wages, but also effect increases on actual wages. Honorable Chair, the Labor Relations Amendment Bill, which was passed in the National Assembly with an overwhelming majority after 2 years of intense engagement in Parliament, provides more protection to fixed-term employees. The proposed amendments to Section 186B of the Labor Relation Amendment Bill provides that failure by an employer to permanently retain an employee who was engaged under a fixed-term contract of employment and who reasonably expected to be permanently retained on the same or similar terms constitute a dismissal. In this regard, temporary employment services, also commonly known as labor broker, employees will be subject to a maximum period of 3 months, after which those employees will be deemed to be permanent employees of the labor broker's client. The amendment seeks to achieve a balance that considers the commercial sustainability of businesses while protecting the interest of workers. The amended section of 145.562 provides that a person who institutes a review application must arrange for the matter to be heard by the labor court within 6 months of commencing proceedings. However, the court has been given the power to condone a failure to comply with this provision on good cause shown. In terms of a new section 145, subsection 6, judges will be required to hand down judgment in review of application as soon as reasonably possible. This provision reiterates the need for the speedy resolution of review of application. We expect that, given the renewed imperative to quickly dispose of matter, employers will take care in managing their own review applications. They will take all necessary steps to progress the matter to avoid censure for delays in the proceedings. Honorable Chair, I move that the House adopts these 2 bills. They are not only a sign of our decisiveness to protect vulnerable workers, but also ensures that we continue to build a nation that respects a strong culture of human rights as espoused by our own constitution. I thank you, Chair.
That concludes the debate. I shall now put the question in respect of the 8th order. The question is that the bill be agreed to. In accordance with Rule 63, I shall first allow political parties to make their declarations of vote if they so wish. We shall now proceed to the voting on the question. Members will vote by pressing in favor, against, or abstain buttons. Have all the members voted? If any of the members have mistakenly pressed the incorrect button, please press the correct button. Voting will close. Could the table staff submit the results?
Majority of members voted in favor.
It's not working. In favor. Oh. The majority of the members voted in favor. I therefore declare the bill agreed to in terms of Section 7.5 of the Constitution. If there is a request for any objection to be noted, the objection of the party will be noted. No objection, okay. I shall now put the question in respect of the 9th order. The question is that the bill subject to the proposed amendments be agreed to. In accordance with Rule 63, I shall first allow political parties to make their declarations of them, if they so wish. We shall now proceed to the voting on the question. Members will vote by pressing in favor, against, or abstain buttons. Have all the members voted? Okay. Why are you talking so loudly? Is there any problem? You want to be assisted? Oh, in favor, okay. Could the table staff submit the results?
Majority of members voted in favor.
The majority of members voted in favor. I therefore declare the bill subject to the proposed amendments agreed to in terms of Section 75 of the Constitution. That concludes the business of the day. Honorable members, you are requested to remain standing until the procession has left the House. The House is adjourned.